Hello and welcome. We have a new guest on the channel to talk about February season cards, 2026. Snappleton, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you got?
Hi, my name's Snappleton. I'm a very small-time Marvel Snap content creator. I've been kind of off of it for a little while I've been in school, but hoping to be back fairly soon. I'm kind of an anti-venom control one trick, so I play a lot of slow techie decks. My favorite thing about the game is talking about the game and finding interesting ways to approach a metagame. I've basically, again, played the same deck or the same couple of decks in most metas, so I like finding ways to adapt a shell to beat whatever is popular. That's kind of my jam.
Cool. Yeah, we met through Golden Gauntlet and just kind of ran some practice games before the tournament. I remember. We both had some jank that we were trying to get through, and I think we both did pretty well, considering the jank we had, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The first Golden Gauntlet, I brought like just a complete like Invisible Woman, Anti-Venom,
Yeah.
Fenris Wolf, just like aiming to beat up
Yeah.
on move bounce at the
Yeah.
time. There was just a ton of move everywhere. So I was playing Shadow King, Invisible Woman, Shang-Chi, like all of the Killmonger to deal with move bounce when Human Torch was a one drop. And yeah, that was the deck I brought, and it did fairly okay, but I ended up actually getting 8 cubed by a randomly generated Cosmo from a move bounce opponent, and that's how my tournament run ended.
Yeah.
So
Should have played around it.
yikes. Should have.
All right, man. Well, that sounds good. I look forward to talking about February season. We kind of just got out of December and January, which I think were fantastic seasons design wise, with a lot of like really impactful and pretty cool cards. Um, I look forward to talking about February season. I don't know if it's gonna pan out the same way as the last 2 months, but what are your kind of overall impressions, real quick?
First impressions, it leaves room for some interesting gameplay patterns. I'm particularly excited about Magus actually, which I know a lot of people think is just a complete trash heap. So it'll be interesting to see how you can make certain cards work that other people don't think that can. I think that a couple of them are a little basic. I think that like Drax is hard to really find like an auto include home for. Just it doesn't have a spot in a deck currently, and it might just be one of those cards that's just like insert generically good 3 here when Surtur is popular. And I'm not exactly sure what that means for it long term. But overall, always excited for a new Snap season.
Yeah, here's my spoiler for what I think of the cards. Is if it's like a weird card, it's bad, and if it's a good card, it just happens to not really have many strings in it, and that makes it kind of boring because you don't really have much to think about deck building wise. You just kind of think of which deck needs a generically good, X cost card, right? That kind of fits that
Mhm.
requirement or whatever. But let's talk about cards, and I'll go into our first card. Okay, we Star Lord, Master of the Sun is our season pass card. He's a 4/5 that says on reveal, next turn you get +1 energy for each turn you've ended with unspent energy, and this gains that much power. What do you think?
This is an interesting one. There's a couple of different gameplay patterns I can see playing out with this because realistically, what you're going for is getting maximum energy output of this card, right? You're playing the Star Lord Master of the Sun deck like it's a Wiccan deck, but you're having to play it potentially on turn 5 if you want to get a proc from that turn, which I think is super interesting here. Obviously, you want to be maximizing the energy you get from it, but the problem is it's just for next turn. It doesn't last permanently like Wiccan does. So I think it's an interesting comparison where you're almost always playing this on turn 5, right?
Yeah, so I have like when we do these slides, as I try to put like either comparisons or synergies, right? And so I think High Evolutionary is obviously the first comparison that you can get. You're already naturally wanting to lose or to end turns with unspent energy for your High Evolutionary procs, your Cyclops, your Misty Knight, your Sunspot. And so I think we're kind of leaning into, because there's two different like kind of archetypes of unspent energy in Marvel Snap, right? There's the Warlock, She-Hulk, Sunspot, Infinite. I want to literally skip my entire turn 5, versus like High Evolutionary with like Misty Knight and Cyclops and Bruce Banner, where you're literally just wanting to do a single energy every turn, and that's all. You have no other incentives to do more energy than that, right? And Star Lord obviously fits into that second category, which makes it kind of awkward, right? Because we might kind of end up seeing a little split, and I obviously think that in playing this card, there's going to be a lot of like lower win rate, high evolutionary archetypes that are running Warlock when it doesn't really make sense with the strengths of Star-Lord, if that makes any sense. I think Star-Lord and high evolutionary, though, if you kind of keep that in mind when you're deck building, has a lot of impact. I mean, what you compare this to something like the Fallen one. This is if you play this on turn 5, let's just assume that you skipped every turn except for like maybe turn 1 because you played a 1-drop. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 4. It's a 4/9 that got you 4 energy for turn 6. I mean, that's really, really powerful. Just especially the power that you get for the next turn. Kind of like a Sarah, kind of like I said, the Fallen one, where you can follow up the next turn, maybe lose priority. I think there's a lot to do with this card. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. I think that the maximum output you are getting out of this card is absolutely going to be 4 or 5 extra energy. You're not really looking to play this in the Warlock decks, I don't think, because in that deck you really have to apply to the board a little bit early, right? You have to get your Warlock down for this to even make any sense, and so you're already considering taking turn 3 off and then playing this on turn 5. It just makes it feel a little bit more awkward, where you feel like you might even need to be a Magic deck at that point, and that's just not what you want to be doing in that shell.
Yeah.
Whereas the high Evo thing, I think, is a lot more interesting. Something that I've noticed that high Evo decks struggle with sometimes is sometimes you're sitting there and you're trying to find ways to sneak in all of the high Evo cards, right? You're trying to play Cyclops, you're trying to play Abomination, you're trying to get as much value out of putting a vanilla 4/7 in your deck as you can. And I think Star-Lord actually enables that a lot more. Oftentimes, you're stuck looking at a turn 6 where all you can play is a Hulk, and you have like a 1-cost Abomination, and you're really sad about it, right? I think that Star-Lord kind of compensates for a little bit of that, and it also allows for just like higher synergy play patterns, right? It's really easy to just play a Juggernaut with the 4 extra energy and play a Hulk on another lane and win both, right? I think that gives the deck a lot of versatility going into the final turn, and has a bit of the strength that the Warlock deck, I think, has an edge over it currently right now, right? Where the Warlock deck is a little bit better than the high Evo decks, simply because it has more surprising turn 6 output. And I think that this card helps kind of bridge that gap a little bit for high Evo.
Yeah, it's the battle of the mid decks, right? They're vying for
exactly.
which mid deck can be even midder, right? I think, I don't know, it's like, does this propel a high evolutionary into being something that isn't mid and is actually pretty good? And then my other question, are there shells that aren't necessarily high evolutionary that want to naturally be, leaving unspent energy? It's kind of weird because, you can't just plan around the Star-Lord and be leaving unspent energy that you would otherwise be able to use, and then half the time you don't draw them or whatever, and then it just feels kind of pointless that you did that, right? So what decks kind of naturally do that, want to do that? I think Symbiote Spider-Man is like a huge, or Wong as well, just like some nice procs that you can do, and just you can kind of build like a Fallen One deck where if you don't have Fallen One, you also have Star-Lord to fall back on, as just kind of planning around a game plan of popping off on turn 6, which with a lot of like Man Spider, Arnim Zola stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. These decks are the decks that always seem to surprise people, where the 1 or 2 people pick this deck up at a high level, figure out how to break Star-Lord in the most unassuming way possible, and all of a sudden your Star-Lord is making you 6 or 7 energy, 8 energy with Symbiote Spider-Man or Wong, and you have a really, really powerful turn 6 play. I think that, interestingly enough, I like that you mentioned how you're not necessarily wanting to plan for this early if you don't have it in your hand, right? You don't really want to be skipping energy. It does kind of the opposite thing that Xiao Lao does, where Xiao wants you to play multiple cards in a turn. Even if you haven't drawn the Xiao, that's just a good thing to be doing anyways, right? Being able to apply pressure in 2 lanes, do multiple things, interact with your opponent, and still apply points to the board. Xiao enables you for doing things you already want to do. I think that this card kind of does the opposite thing, where if you're playing this in a more fair deck, this card wants you to skip energy, which is not a powerful thing to be doing unless you have an archetypal payoff like High Evo to reward you for that. I think this is one of those cards that we're going to experiment with a lot, but ultimately is going to be a High Evo 1 trick and make the deck 2% better.
Okay.
And honestly, good. High Evo needs the help.
So you don't think there's going to be like a Man Spider or Symbiote Spider-Man kind of combo deck where this just naturally is able to fit in? Do you think it's like too hard to naturally skip that energy?
I think it's a little hard to enable, and I think that there's just kind of better payoffs.
Okay.
When in a game like Marble Snap, where you have you have a 75% chance to draw any given card in your deck by turn 6, you have a 66% chance, I believe, to draw any given card by turn 5. Those are pretty high odds to draw either Fallen One or like Nimrod. Whatever your secondary payoff is, I think that there's just a better secondary payoff than him in most case scenarios.
Fair. Yeah, I think he's really good with Symbiote Spider-Man, but I can obviously see, like, if you have Black Panther, you might as well just do that instead. If you don't get the Symbiote Spider-Man, then your Star-Lord is kind of mediocre as a back payoff, right? So I can obviously see that, and I really look forward to experimenting with this card. I think it's a pretty powerful card, especially with that post data mine buff where they actually let him gain power as well as the energy. I think this is going to be a really good card that hopefully can bring High Evo back, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I really like that they gave it extra power as well. Energy scaling and power scaling are two very different things. One of them is more face up, one of them is more like hidden information.
Yeah.
I think that it's really cool that he does both.
Cool. All right, let's go to the next card.
All right, our next card this season is Magus, and this card has an interesting line of text. Activate, copy the text of a character in your deck with cost equal to your unspent energy, and notably this doesn't use on reveals. The 3/5 stat line is pretty nice, but this is a weird one. What do you think?
I think this card is terrible. I thought it was already kind of mediocre if it could copy on reveals, but it was really cool with Beta Ray Bill. You could copy a hammer, or maybe this is abusable with Mr. Negative, just because you could copy some silly things. But now, if it can't copy on reveals, like the pool of targets is just much smaller. This is a 3/5, and you got to tag on that cost on top of waiting till the next turn or the turn after or whatever. You can't just do this on turn 6. And then you have to use the energy as well of the card, and you can't use on reveals. So it's like there's Iron Man, and then there's like you could get like a big ongoing and then copy that with Moonstone since it's technically 3 cost. But that's all I have in mind when I look through cards that weren't activates. And it can't be activate either, because you're activating this card in the first place to get that text. So it's like, what are we doing other than Iron Man? What do you think? Like, what can we do?
I have a few ideas, and all of them are terrible. Okay. My top 3 ideas are, well, the first one is obviously Iron Man things. I think this is Iron Man's absolute best friend. It has really interesting implications with doing something insane on turn 6, where you use this, activate it on turn 5, copy Iron Man's text, then you play She-Hulk in a 5-drop on turn 6. I think that's pretty compelling to me. Or even just having the ability to play even just like a Hydra Bob, a Juggernaut, and your She-Hulk. Like you've got options to play on the final turn, but this card asks you to put only 1 5 cost in your deck, right? Or the thing that I think is interesting is it's asking you to put only very specific cards in your deck, right? You need to have either multiple good targets at a cost, or you need to have 1 target at every cost going up the line that you want to be able to hit, which I think is interesting. Like having Iron Man be your only 5, Gore be your only 6, things like that, where you're trying to target specific things with this card, which makes it a really interesting deck building challenge. The bad things I want to do with this card is putting this in a Dracula dump deck, where you activate this on 4 and it becomes Dracula, and that's kind of cool, and then you're able to have that be your only 4 because it's kind of your top end. Is it bad? Absolutely. Other things I've been thinking about doing with this is playing this on 3, activating it with 1 unspent energy to turn it into an Ebony Maw, and playing Viper on that same turn. Again, also absolutely a terrible idea, but it does kind of Professor X Elaine on turn 4. So there's a lot of really weird interactions with this card that I can see being broken if you can compensate for it with a points package. And I think that the Iron Man thing kind of gives you a way to do that, right?
So we were talking earlier about like odds of drawing cards, right? By turn 5, it's a 66% chance to draw something. So in the 2/3 of games where you draw Iron Man beforehand, like what is Magus doing? Like I can see the Gore and the Iron Man synergy, but like first off, no one's playing Gore and Iron Man other than Mr. Negative in the same deck. I suppose you could try. I like that there's the unspent energy thing, so you can try to do like a Warlock or a She-Hulk kind of thing and just skip on turn 5. But it's like, what other 5 drops are there that aren't Iron Man? And then what kind of decks like don't just fall apart when you don't get one of these pieces or draw things in the wrong order? You know what I mean? Like I need some other options that all make sense together for Magus to have like multiple copy targets, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, other good targets theoretically are Professor X, Claw. You can play a deck where you do the turn 5 skip. This becomes either a Claw or a Professor X. Hopefully a Professor X, but maybe he becomes a Professor X. You have turn 6, you get to play She-Hulk Claw, get into the Prof X lane if you need to. I mean, there's like, this card just makes a lot of not great cards more gimmicky, which is I don't think that's what they need, right? Like bad cards are already kind of gimmicky. You don't need to make the problem worse. Something interesting to think about though is with the draw consistency, we do now have 3 cards that stifle draws. We can play this in a Wiccan deck potentially with Iron Man and have Shang-Chi, Domino, and Quicksilver. But again, why are we trying to justify playing like both Quicksilver and Domino and the rings? I don't think that there's a lot of huge incentives for this card to be good in that kind of shell, but I could definitely see it happening, where you're playing a Wiccan deck where you're already able to play like Wiccan into Gore or something. I mean, I could see you having the extra energy from Wiccan, being able to do something on turn 5. Like, there's options. I think that if there is ever a home for it, it's some sort of Wiccan shell that gets to play Magus and Iron Man. That being said, I don't think that that's a particularly good direction to be looking in this metagame, at least currently.
Yeah, so I just think, in my opinion, I think this is the worst card that we've got in a long time. And I just think, yeah, like I said, it's just not consistent. Squash, the friend that I used to record with before, he's been a huge fan of Moonstone recently and Moonstone ongoing decks, right? And so he made sure to point out to me, the Moonstone interaction of like if you copy a Claw or something like that or an Iron Man, the Moonstone will double that on the Magus, which is pretty cool. That being said, I don't think there's space for this. You already are running Iron Lad, and I think Iron Lad is just better in most scenarios because you're not using the extra energy as well. So I don't know. Other than that, I just don't think that there's a home, and the one home that I could think of, it just feels like it gets beaten out. So I don't see this seeing any play unless it gets buffed. I was really looking forward to hopefully this working with on-reveals and making Beta Ray Bill a more interesting card. But as is, I don't think this is going to see any play at all.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I do think that we do have to keep our eye out for some weird person who cooks up the perfect Wiccan deck with this. I mean, think about it. You've got Speed with Moonstone. That's an ongoing that costs 3. You've got the Moonstone thing. You can play Iron Man in that list. Like there might be something going on there, but I highly doubt that it's going to amount to anything. Yeah,
sorry. Something I forgot to mention. What about like Tribunal combo? Like you can copy Tribunal, Onslaught, or Iron Man. I really hate the idea of spending 6 energy on like a 0 power Tribunal or Onslaught. I feel like that power actually does matter. Not to mention like you're wasting your turn 3 to try and do that. But like you could just play like Esme Cuckoo or Magic or any of these other cards that kind of make it easier for you to draw your combo pieces in the first place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that it can't copy Mystique definitely just makes it completely useless in that deck. I think that if you were only able to spend 3 energy to do the thing, and then be able to still play your like Tau Mandala or whatever, that could potentially have some legs, but I don't see it working unless it is able to copy on reveals. I don't know that they'll end up changing that. I really, really would love to see this work with the Thors, but yeah, I highly doubt it's going to be good at all.
What about with, I'm looking it up right now, about how this would work with negative. Like if you get a 0 cost Gore in your deck after you play negative and you immediately activate this the turn you play Mr. Negative, would it? I think it would, right? It would count it as 0?
I think it copies it as 0. I don't exactly remember. This is something that I know I should know after playing this game for so long. Like capital C versus lowercase c. because there's some
I'm looking at
interesting
Jane right
interactions
now.
with how like Blink and Pixie work. But,
Yeah, I'm looking at Jane right now. It looks like it's undercase, which means, and this one's uppercase. So I don't think that
so
would
it
work.
copies base cost.
Yeah, so that's also another reason this card is bad.
Yeah, like every single thing. I feel like we're trying to make this card good.
Yeah,
so bad.
The art
and
is
every
so
single
good.
thing we mention is like, you want me to put Claw and Iron Man in my deck when I could be playing Xiao Lao?
Yeah.
I don't like. It's not really worth our time at the current moment. Then again, this card can copy a lot of things text. Every single new card that comes out for now until the end of time, especially if they keep printing stuff like Star-Lord that give us reasons to unspend energy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of those cards that looks like it has a future, right? Where inevitably something's going to get printed that makes this thing awesome. But until that point comes, I'm not really interested in
I hope
messing
so.
around with it too much, unless I get to actually Viper people with Ebony Mox. I think that'd be hilarious, but I don't think it'll work, but it'll be hilarious.
Yeah, it'll be fun when it does. Alright, man. Let's go to the next card. We have Moondragon. So Moondragon is a 2/2 that says end of turn +2 power if you played one card this turn and spent all of your energy. So 2 conditions. What do you think?
I think this is an interesting one. The funny thing is that the 2 conditions kind of tend to work out well with a lot of the cards that want to utilize it, right? You're wanting, like, the whole point of playing a ramp deck, or like I said, Symbiote, Spider-Man, Electro, the cards that seem to work with this really well is you're going to want to be spending all that energy anyways, or what's the point in getting extra energy? So I think it does synergize pretty well in those types of decks. It's no chamber, right? It's not really close to being chamber. But it's still a big 2-drop. I mean, this card can do some work, and I do really like the Superior Spider-Man. Synergy, I think that the more ways to make that card work in ramp decks over something like Electro, the better.
Yeah, so what I think is, I initially was really down on this card because I didn't realize it counted the same turn it was played. But if you play this on 2, it's immediately a 2/4, which is like a lot faster growing than I thought it would be. So, like, I mean, what is the size of a 2-drop that makes you happy without having to do much work? Is it like a 2/6? Are you happy with a 2/6 that doesn't involve much work, or is it 2/8? Because, you know, keep in mind, this is a bad draw later in the game. Most of the time later in the game it's 2/2, like maybe a 2/4 if you aren't playing it on exactly turn 2. So, like, what power are you happy enough to run this where it's like, I understand this is going to be like a 2/8 or 2/10 if I get it early, and if I get it late, it's 2/2 or 2/4. What power makes up for that?
I think the number that this has to get to for me to feel like it's worth meeting 2 conditions on a card like this is 2/8. I've been pleasantly surprised by how good Wild Child has been in the limited Phantom X testing that I've done, where it's a 2/7, and that's been big enough. I think that this card has all the right boxes to check if you play this on turn 2. The hard part is this card gets progressively worse when you don't play it on 2, but that's not really an issue for the ramp deck. The ramp deck does not want to be playing anything that isn't a 6-drop.
Just blink it, right?
Past turn 4. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
you can even play this and blink on turn 7.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I think about playing this, and so like, let's just say 2/8 is our goal, right? If I play this on turn 2, it's 2/4, so I only need 2 more turns where I'm curving out, and I feel like a lot of decks can curve out 2 turns. You know what I mean? How many decks can justify, you know, if I don't play this on turn 2, then it's going to be a 2/2 or 2/4? That is probably a bigger question, right? But I like that this is an extra card for Superior Spider-Man. So now you have, Zombie Mr. Fantastic, Sam Wilson, Moondragon. There's a couple more, like, playable 2-drops that curve into Superior Spider-Man. Obviously, Doom 2099 was a card that we haven't talked about. I don't want to talk about it any more than bringing up his name and saying he's bad. And that's where we're going to end that discussion. But I think that this card might just slot into more decks, just as a vanilla 2/8 that sometimes is a little bit worse. But they can just naturally play 2 to 3 cards on curve after turn 2, and you're super happy with that.
I think that this one's an interesting one to try and slot into, like, just like your average mid-range deck. The 1 card a turn restriction is so much more than it seems like it is. And when it comes down to this card, if you don't have it on turn 2, it's not going to proc itself the turn you play it.
Yeah.
So even if you draw this on turn 3 and go, shoot, my 2/8 is a 2/2 because I can't ever realistically justify playing this, that causes some issues for me for sure. I do think that it is notable. It's maybe not the best thing in the world. I do want to talk a little bit about Doom 2099 because this is an end of turn card.
Yeah.
I think that the more weird one card a turn, end of turn things we can get to happen, I mean, you can play Invisible in first steps with Doom 2099 and Moondragon. I don't know that it's the most fantastic thing in the world, but it certainly gives you a curve and it gives you something else to do. 2 power isn't like the most fantastic incentive to be playing Invisible in first steps, granted. But it is worth noting that Doom 2099 just got buffed. This is an end of turn. There might be something there eventually.
Yeah, and Fantastic Card was another card that I was thinking about as well. Aurora as well. I don't know how much those cards want to be playing on curve after turn 2 rather than like playing a bunch of 1-drops that say end of turn on them, right? But I think that those are worth thinking about at the very least. You know, you play Moondragon on turn 2, you play Invisible Woman, Fantastic Car on curve, and I think you're pretty happy with how your Moondragon went, even if you're not curving on turn 5 and 6, and you're not expecting to, right? So I think that there's something there. Like I said, I think Ramp is a good shout-out as well. With Electro, Luna Snow, you go into your 5-drop, you go into your 6-drop, and then if you draw it late, you can blink it away as well. There's an option of that. I just don't know if there's space for Moondragon in that deck, but I think it would be a reasonable inclusion into that deck. What about, like, Wiccan? Let's just say, like, you play this on 2, and then, like, you just literally have a 3 and a 4, and then, you know, if you miss your Wiccan, then sometimes you have a 5, right? If you play this on 2 and Wiccan, and let's just say you got your 3 and your 4, this is a 2/8, and maybe you're playing Blink in that deck too. I don't know. Just throwing out ideas, right? Like, is that reasonable there?
Oh, absolutely. I think a 2/8 in Wiccan like elevates that deck. Like,
yeah,
that's the type of deck that needs big stat sticks at the lower cost, right? Having this and speed as just like play this rewards you for doing the thing you're already trying to do is honestly just fantastic. And I think that it's not entirely unreasonable to make a hybridized Wiccan deck that tries to spend 7 energy on the turn afterwards as well. Like,
yeah,
we
you
have a good 7-drop in the game, and we have Wave.
Yeah.
Like, we can go Quicksilver, Moondragon, Wave, Fin Fang Foom. Still, like, we don't... Like, that gives us a secondary line as well, I think, which I do like. And I think it's a good shout-out to point out the Blink thing. I mean, playing this and Blink later in the game when you've ramped is really good. And if you're already playing a Wave, like, Foom deck, you're pretty interested in doing stuff like that. You get to play Iron Lad and Wiccan decks for additional consistency on hitting your Wiccan and also Foom. I mean, I think that there's some pretty reasonable upside to be playing a Wiccan shell like this.
Yeah. And I think just one last thing on that, like, Wiccan idea. Just I love Wiccan myself. I think as a 4/6, he's just kind of fallen off a little bit. But I love the idea that you can, let's just say your 2-drops are Moondragon, Sam Wilson, and some other kind of, you know, buff 2-drop. And then you can run Superior Spider-Man. That's like your backup bonus energy as well. For this kind of Wiccan deck, so that you can kind of always plan around at least having some kind of bonus energy for your game plan. I think that there's something there, right? I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting and kind of fun to talk about such a vanilla-looking card, but it has some kind of homes where it can do something cool.
Absolutely. This is the card I'm particularly high on. I think that it's easier to enable than people think. Even in stuff like Aurora, you can play a more curve-out Aurora deck where you play Wong on turn 4 and spend all your energy to enable the Aurora on 6. So I think there's a lot more things to do with this card than people think, but it is going to feel really awful when you don't get to play this on turn 2.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing that's going to hold this card back. It's pretending like it's a vanilla 2/8 without considering that it's a 2/8 on turn 2 makes this card a lot more Sam Wilson-y than it is like, I don't know, Rhino or Maximus, right?
Fair.
It's just on a different axis. And I think that the decks that want to be curving out every turn are absolutely going to want this. Again, Wiccan, Ramp, I think that they can make pretty good use of it, but it's just like Chamber where it's going to feel so bad when it's not on turn 2, and it's going to feel so good when you get your 2/11 or whatever on turn 2. So it's a big power spike, and it gives you kind of a secondary Chamber in the Ramp decks and another huge stat stick on turn 2 for Wiccan. So I'm pretty excited about this card.
This card would have been so cool if, like, Old Sandman was still around. I feel like it just would have slotted perfectly there, but okay. Anyways, next card, let's do it.
Our next card is Drax, Avatar of Life. It's a 3/4 with an end of turn ability that gives it +3 power if your opponent played a card with greater power this turn. And you also get to move that this card, move to that card. The phrasing is kind of weird on this one, but you move Drax to wherever the bigger card was played if you'd be winning that lane. This card has a lot of really interesting implications. What do you think?
So it's weird. I think this is a great card, but the funny thing is, like, I don't really think there's a ton of strings attached that like make sense, at least in those archetypes. So it's like, I think this is always going to be a 3/7 at the very least, and pretty often it's going to be a 3/10. And I think this is a great, like a fantastic, card to play on turn 6 with priority, as a kind of pseudo Captain Marvel, just a 3/7 Captain Marvel if you play it on turn 6. So I think there's a lot to do. Well, actually, no, it's end of turn. I lied. You can even play this without prio. I think there's a lot that this can do. I wonder how it works with something like Kraven or Ant-Man, if it knows that it would get that extra power when it moved there. From the phrasing, it sounds like it does, but I'm not sure. You're not okay. You're nodding or not nodding. You're shaking your head, so maybe not. But either way, I think this is a fantastic card, and it's just the question of how many decks aren't really synergy based, that literally just want a really big 3-drop that wins a lot of games, and I think the answer to that is a lot.
I also think the answer to that is a lot. I'm inclined to believe that this doesn't count the Kraven proc towards winning that location. Like if you would be winning the location if the Kraven proc goes off, but wouldn't be if the Kraven proc doesn't go off. I think that this won't move.
Okay.
But I am intrigued by this card. I think that the end of turn text is a little bit more important than people are realizing. Like, when I first saw this card, I assumed that it just counted every big card that got played and would move multiple times in the same turn. But the fact that it's an end of turn does make it so that if you draw this later, it is a little bit worse. But I'm inclined to believe that this card's really good.
I mean, like, even one move, it's a 3/7, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 3/7 Captain Marvelness and even the slightest tense is really good. I think that 3-drops that help you flip a location is exactly the type of card I'm interested in, right? This being able to play this card early on and having like something like Sage as a comparison to this, I think is the closest comparison, where this card gets big and it contests a lane that your opponent is also contesting, which is some of the most important things to do in Marvel Snap. In a lot of games, 2 lanes are completely sealed off, right? You're clearly winning one, your opponent's clearly winning another, and you're fighting over that 3rd lane. This card is fantastic at helping you do that.
Yeah.
Something that does worry me a little bit, there was a recent Topaz buff. Not that I think it's going to be the most crazy impactful thing, but this card does get shut off by Mercury, at least as far as the moving part goes, but it does still get the power, and I like that they put that on there. Being able to not tie the power to being able to move is a huge part of this card. It just gets the power if they play a bigger guy.
Yeah. I think this is really good. I'm trying to convince myself. The only, like, thing I can think of it backfiring, right? Because people always talk about Clog. I mean, no one's going to play a big card, let's say this is a 3/7, and people are arguing that, like, you can play a bigger card and it'll leave the lane that, it was already winning. If they play the lane, the big guy into a lane that you're already winning by a lot or something. I don't think that's a good argument, because then your opponent is playing a big card into the lane that they're going to lose, and they know they're going to lose. So I don't think that's a good argument.
Yeah, they have to invest a lot.
Yeah. So I see this, and I'm like, okay, unless they're playing like a big 5-drop in this lane that I have 3 cards already, and then, they can play another big card to try and win that lane after. That's the only bad scenario I can think of for Drax, and otherwise it just seems like so much gravy. And then that's not even talking about like some synergies that like I said, this doesn't have a ton of strings, I don't think, but you have Iron Patriot, and this is a fantastic follow-up to Iron Patriot, I think. You have Aurora, and so that just literally just gives us +2. And the problem with Aurora a lot of the time was, you play Aurora in one lane and it just kind of doesn't win 2 lanes, if that makes sense. And Drax can really help with that. You have Miles Morales, where you can kind of, if you have a little bit of a small move package with like Sam Wilson or something, You can also play Drax, and that'll pretty consistently get you 1-cost Miles Morales for the final turn of the game, I would imagine. Or at least at one point in the game. So I think there's just no reason not to run this as long as you're not playing like a Zoo deck or something.
Oh yeah, this is a fantastic mid-range card. I also think that it's really interesting to point out the Aurora thing here. The more good cards that they print that have any text on them at all, like just anything, the better Aurora gets. I think Aurora is a huge mistake to print as a card. I think that this card is going to just slowly get stronger and stronger and stronger to the point where it's the defining mid-range deck, because every single one of your cards pays you off for playing Aurora, which I do think is interesting. And I think that as much as I hate that just every new card we go, oh, this is an Aurora card, we can play this in Aurora, I also think it's really interesting that it can make cards that aren't that good viable.
Yeah.
And the fact that it pushes you towards playing a 6-drop on 6, that's some like retro Marvel Snap right there. That's some good, clean, locally sourced, homegrown, organic, fair Marvel Snap. And that also kind of intrigues me. The biggest issue I see with Drax is that it's able to get Deafening Corded. There's not necessarily a shortage of decks that are playing big cards in the meta, but it is notable that the Shao decks buff retroactively.
Yeah.
The best deck in the game right now doesn't really give you a lot of targets for it. What, 5-6 Shao?
Yes, the only one.
5 power Scarlet Spider.
Yeah.
I think those are the only things that proc it in the entire list. So that's something that is worth noting, especially since it's just still so good. Shao is still just the best deck, and notably, this doesn't really give you that much of an edge into it. I'd be a lot more interested in this card, just in general, into the current metagame, if it felt like it did more against the Shao deck. If I'm going to be playing a 3/10, big, powerful mid-range card that drives me into playing a mid-range deck, I really want it to be good against the Shao deck instead of abysmal. And the combination of Cord and them having very few targets for this to actually hit makes me a little pessimistic about it, honestly, into the current metagame, of course. But obviously against the ramp deck, it's fantastic. And against a lot of other reasonable decks, it seems to be doing a lot. But I just don't know how often you're going to get the second proc into what we're currently seeing right now. I think you'll very easily get this to be a 3/7 that does a Captain Marvel-esque thing, and I think that's super good, worth playing already. But I don't know that you're going to high roll with this that often.
So I'm not so worried about high rolling. I think a 3/7, like it's a 3/7 by default if you just play it on turn 3, and if you play it on turn 6, it's Captain Marvel 3/7, right? I think it's fantastic into ramp. I think it's fantastic into high evolutionary. I'm trying to think. Is it other than Shu and ramp? Are there what are the big bads of this metagame? I'm trying to even think right now.
That's a good question. There's Nimrod things that people are doing, which this is fine into.
I wouldn't.
I
don't think this is great into those.
The Cerebro is always a deck. This is terrible into Cerebro.
Yeah.
I don't really know that there's anything specific to point to as the tyrants of the metagame, because it's just Shao, right? There's Shao and a bunch of decks that are competing for second place. And if you're not doing something that beats up on Shao, that you're usually just kind of falling behind. And when you are falling behind, you're just get outstatted by all the decks that are not doing Shao things, since they're harder to interact with the interaction you're playing targeting Shao. So it's kind of an interesting spot right now. I think that I've got an interesting question for you. And how often do you see Spider-Punk being played in just your average mid-range deck? Because 3/7 moves once reminds me a lot of Spider-Punk.
True.
And I don't necessarily... I think that this is probably one of the closer comparisons that you can make for this card. Spider-Punk gives you more agency. This puts the pressure in the hands of the opponent, which I think is interesting, and both of them have the potential to proc multiple times for plus 3-ish power, right? What do you think about the comparison there? And as far as, do you play both of these with Miles Morales? Is this like are we making a Prowler deck? Like, what's the deal here?
I think the moving text is more just like a extra like bonus kind of thing, where you're not really too much invested in building around synergies with the move, if that makes any sense. Like, sometimes it just happens to move, and that's nice. But, like, you're not adding Prowler to a deck, you're not adding Miles to the deck unless you already were very inclined to do so. I think that your shout out is good, and it's something that that we absolutely should consider. I think deafening chord isn't something that I'm too worried about, because then it's just like they spent one energy on this, and you still have a 3/4 on the board. So really, they played a 3/4 themselves. Or sorry, what did they do? I don't know. They spent one energy to make you play a 3/4.
1/3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like that's not that crazy. You know what I mean? I already forgot your question, but
I think that, like, if they do chord this and they were going to proc it twice, though, it's kind of a 1/6. Like, it's not nothing.
yeah,
But I do think that it's certainly not the most important thing, and it's kind of the Aurora thing, right? Where we just mention it because we have to. Hey, this card costs less than 3. We should and has text. We should probably mention chord. But I think that overall, this is going to be a good mid-range card. It's going to do something in a deck at some point. It's going to have a lot of additional upside into metagames where people are playing bigger cards, and I like that. I like that it's a tech card in the sense that it gets better when people are playing certain decks, and it's better into some matchups, but it doesn't ask anything of you except play a guy that's big, and I think that that's a great spot for a mid-range card to be.
yeah. Sorry, one last thing. I just remembered your question was about the Spider-Punk comparison. Yeah, so I think that just first off, the ability to play this on the last turn and for it to turn into Captain Marvel is huge. If you play Spider-Punk on last turn, it's literally a 3/3. I like that it can still stay in its own lane, and Spider-Punk can't do that. It has to move. So I think that that's worth shouting out as well. But yeah, I think this is going to be a really good card. I don't know if it's great into a Shao meta, but I think into a lot of metas it'll just be a good card, and I could honestly see this getting nerfed. If we're in a mid-range meta,
Yeah,
I should say.
I'm pretty inclined to agree with you here. I think that it's interesting, though, because what do you nerf on this card? Because my problem with this card is, what are you going to do, nerf the power and then make it easier to proc? I think that's kind of interesting, where it's like, oh yeah, you nerf the power on it, and now all of a sudden it procs on 7s, and that might even just make it better. I think it's certainly an interesting one to see how they adjust the dials on this, or if they're just fine letting it go. I think that it's kind of interesting how much power they've been juicing into these like move adjacent mid-range decks, because they've been pretty powerful lately. I think the Lin Lei buff was completely unjustified, actually. That card was already pretty good in my opinion, and them buffing it just took it over the top to the point where I think they could nerf it right back again, and I'd be a lot happier with the state of that card. I think that eventually people are going to start realizing that it's just Dakin, but it also is easier to proc than Dakin in a variety of different lists, and it's going to start causing some issues. And I can see the more cards they start printing like Drax, where there's just kind of this incidental move value. It doesn't do a lot, but sometimes you get a 1/6 Miles, and you can just kind of put Miles in a deck with a bunch of cards that are just 3/10s. Like, I think that we're approaching a point where those like Craven Batroc decks can also just as easily be like Drax Lin Lei decks where they're playing Frigga and things like that. Because interestingly enough, it's an end of turn. Like, you can play this on 3, and if it gets procced with their 3/5, you can like Frigga this on the turn afterwards.
Yeah.
I think that that's not nothing.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's go to the next card, man. We got Major Victory. He's a 3/4 that says, on reveal, add 2 members of the Guardians crew to your hand. And so Guardians crew, it's not like Team Clash where you're going to have Adam Warlock and Cosmo and all these guys. It's literally from the base game, or the base like starting point, where you have Rocket Raccoon, Drax, Gamora, Groot, Star-Lord, Mantis. But like, you're not getting Nebula, you're not getting anything released past that. So literally just predicting where your opponent is going to play a card.
Yeah, this card has some interesting implications. I mean, obviously the direct comparison is Agent Coulson, right? And I think this is kind of an interesting one. I mean, obviously V-Hand is a consideration here. It's notable that they're going to be characters. They're always going to get the buff. It's not like you're going to hit skills with this or something. So it's one of the cards that obviously slots into V-Hand. And I think that it is notable that it is slightly biased towards cheaper cards. Just because of the inclusion of Mantis at the 1-drop. There's 2 1s you can get. There's a 2-drop, a 3-drop, a 4-drop, and a 5-drop. So notably curved towards the lower end, which is what you want to see with a card like this. I'm a little skeptical of the 3/4 stat line, but I do think that being able to play this in a V-Hand deck is pretty important. I don't know that this slots into your high roll draws, though, where you're playing V-Hand on 2, Frigga on 3, things like that. I don't necessarily see Major Victory slotting into the curve really well. It's a little awkward to have to play this on turn 4 when you're likely going to get cheap cards off of this, and you want to play him earlier on in order to get those procs. That being said, obviously V-Hand plays a lot of cheap cards. It's not exactly the hardest thing in the world to play a 1-drop in that deck, but I don't know how high the value over replacement is for this guy. I don't know that it makes the deck better.
So I think that the Guardians are a lot better on turn 6, where it's kind of more obvious where your opponent is going to play cards. And I think that's kind of a bonus that he kind of gives them to you after, if that makes sense. Like having them available later in the game instead of as draws that are just, dead early. I was really down on this card, but like I'm just thinking about Quinjet and Victoria Hand, and like you're gonna average around like a little bit more than 2 cost, considering that there's 2 1-drops and there's no 6-drop. So it's like 2.5 is your average cost, and you have Quinjet, so now it's like 1.5 most of the time, right? And that's actually kind of interesting that you can just go the last turn, play 2 Guardians. Let's just say you got a Groot and a Rocket Raccoon, right? That'll probably be like your average thing. I think that's pretty good. I don't know. It's. I can see this whiffing. You never want to get Drax. You rarely want to get Gamora. But there's Werewolf by Night synergy as well, where these cards are always on reveal as well. And you can just kind of burst your opponent on turn 6 if you know where they're going to play, along with your Victoria Hand synergies. Maybe like you get Major Victory and you get like a Rocket Raccoon that you know where it's going to proc, and then you can Frigga that as well. I think there's some kind of neat stuff, but otherwise this is a really bad card. Any other deck, I don't see this seeing any play without like Quinjet and Victoria Hand being able to kind of prop them up, if that makes any sense. But I don't know. I feel like I was really down on this card, and now I'm just thinking about Victoria Hand and Quinjet and the average of the costs and like that burst at the end of the game, and maybe that's interesting.
Yeah, I think the average cost is a little bit different than you think, because the 1 cost won't get discounted by Quinjet.
Yeah,
so if we're talking Quinjet math, it's not quite 1.5, it's
Yeah.
a little bit more. But overall, I do think that you bring up a good point. I mean, talking about this card, I'm looking at it, it's a 3-4, it's understated, it's giving me cards I don't play in decks already, right? All of those things are insanely huge red flags for me. Then I look at the cards that we're talking about it being good with, and they're all cards that are absolutely incredible. So taking that into consideration, is it worth playing this card, which is underwhelming admittedly in any other deck, to enable Victoria Hand and Quinjet? Its value over replacement has to be there, because there's a lot of mediocre cards that generate cards.
Yeah.
And Victoria Hand and Quinjet have proven time and time again to absolutely elevate those. My biggest issue is I think that the card in the stock Victoria Hand list that has to come out for this card is something along the lines of Moon Girl, and I don't like that. Because adding 2 cards to your hand is so much more than 1 when you're trying to slim your hand for that Moon Girl to give you another V-Hand.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is a deck that you're focused on doing the same thing that you do with the DAC index, the Lin Lei decks, where you really want to duplicate your build around card as many times as possible, which is V-Hand. And I don't know that this fits into that theme. It does not Bastion, it doesn't do something that copies V-Hand, and I don't know that it does anything better than any of the other cards that can generate cards. I do like the idea of getting 2 cards for 1. I really like the idea of like Shadow King, Groot, Star-Lord on turn 6.
Yeah.
It's not nothing. It's something that's certainly powerful. I like that it throws priority so that you're able to play your tech cards, Shadow King them first, then play your green power cards. There's a lot of things that I like about this card, but I'm still skeptical. There's a lot of cards that come out that you go, oh, this could go in Victoria Hand, and it just doesn't really meaningfully make the deck better.
Yeah.
I think the deck is really strong, and so it's notable that it goes into a archetype that's already powerful. It's hard to see what this replaces in that list.
I think there's a lot of builds, and so I think I'm actually going to experiment with running Major Victory in a Victoria Hand deck, because I already didn't really like playing Moon Girl. I'm of the opinion that Victoria Hand should have been nerfed to that she didn't work off copying herself, so she just buffs other things. That's just me. I'm not a designer.
Oh yeah.
And so you're absolutely right that if it doesn't copy Victoria Hand, then it kind of loses stocks in that, and that's fair. And I think you're absolutely right to be skeptical because this card is nowhere near sniffing being good in any other deck, and it's nowhere near like you wanting to play it. If the second you get Drax and Gamora in the same one, you're gonna want to delete this from your deck, or you can't play it early, and so now you have to play it on turn 6 and it's a 3/4. You know, there's obviously scenarios where this is like kind of cool, and then most of them where it might be bad. But I just think it's kind of neat that we can experiment with this in Victoria hand, if anything. But yeah, definitely kind of a stinker, but I want to try this in Victoria hand.
I do too. I think it's interesting though, like to think about what's our best hit. If we're like the dream case scenario for this card, let's lay it out. You play Quinjet on 1, you play V hand on 2,
Yeah.
you play like Frigga on turn 3, you play this guy and Deafening Chord or Agony or something on turn 4.
Yeah.
And then you hit, presumably you want to hit things that Quinjet discounts, so Star-Lord and Groot are probably your best hits.
Yeah.
Then you've got, that's 3 energy on the next turn. You play the other V hand you copied. Turn 6, you do something weird.
Yeah.
I can see it curving out just fine, but I don't love that Quinjet doesn't work with 2 of the hits, and it's gonna feel really bad when you get Mantis too.
Yeah,
I think you've
that's
kind
fair.
of got, I think you got three whiffs on this card.
Yeah,
but
Mantis is
I'm
kind of
interested
a
to
whiff.
see how it plays out.
I'll try it. Hopefully it works. I'll misery away the Mantis every time, and it'll totally be great, right? But yeah,
Right. Yeah.
I understand being skeptical about this. I know a lot of people say this card is bad, and I was thinking the same thing. And it's probably going to be bad, but I will go try it out, and that's the most discussion I will have for this card now. All right, let's go to the next one.
Our next card is Kraglin. It's a 3/3 with an on reveal. Banish the top card of your deck. If it was a 4-cost or higher, +2 energy next turn. Otherwise, you give this +4 power. This has a lot of really interesting things going on for it. What do you think about this card?
So I'm really low on this card, but like a little insider discussion is that Snappleton, this is your first time reading this card, that you haven't seen this one before, and you're kind of interested. So I look forward to hearing what you think. But for me, I like that this is kind of like right now you have Wave, and that's the only way that you can play a 6-drop on turn 4. And right now I'm running that in my ramp deck because I like the idea of going, playing your Giganto sometimes. And so this kind of adds consistency to that. So you have 2 options now to be able to play a 6-drop on turn 4, which I think is really powerful. My problem is if you whiff, it's a 3/7 and you didn't know it was going to whiff, so you didn't plan around that. Sometimes I have a Wave and Electro in hand or something, and I don't have a good 5-drop or something, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to play Wave. In this scenario, let's just say I have 5-drop, and I'm like, oh, but I want to play my Kraglin because I have a really good 6, and then your Kraglin whiffs. And you didn't know that, and you would have obviously liked to play your Electro in that scenario instead. But now you're kind of screwed, right? So there's that, right? My other problem is I was thinking, okay, what's a 6-drop that I really want to cheat out that's, like, worth it? And that's Galactus. Galactus is like the only 6-drop that is really good to cheat out on turn 4 versus like 5 or something and just playing Electro. But Galactus is kind of weird because like you can't have a win con in your deck with Kraglin because you still risk the idea of banishing it. I hate like the discussion of like Cable and banishing the top card of your opponent's deck because like you're losing something. I just pretend it's at the bottom of my deck. But if my opponent knows that my win con is gone, then that's a problem, And I'm playing that on my own deck. It's not like my opponent is playing a kind of bad card to justify that. It's I'm the one that's risking my opponent getting a free idea of snapping on me, right? So it's like, what other 6-drops that don't like fall apart if I lose them am I doing? You know what I mean? And also don't fall apart if I miss on getting a 4+ cost card and getting the energy when this is just a 3/7,
Certainly interesting. I think you're getting focused on the wrong part of this card, though.
Okay.
I think that the +2 energy is the better mode. But I think that you're going to just play this in a mid-range deck where you don't mind playing a 3/7 that sometimes is a 3/3 that gives you energy. So I think that there's a couple interesting things to talk about when it comes down to this type of thing, where having 2 effects makes you again, have a not quite a 50% chance because you can look at your deck, do some math, but you don't always have the consistency of knowing what this is giving you. That makes this card worse. What makes this card better is the fact that I think both modes are pretty okay. I don't mind having a 3/7 that, and I'm going to take a slightly different approach on this. It can absolutely hit your win con. I don't think you're playing this in a deck that has a specific win con.
Okay.
I think that that's too much of a risk to take, and that it's kind of not really the point of what the card is doing. I think that you're able to just play this in some random mid-range deck where you can play this guy, and it's increased draw consistency sometimes, where it thins the deck so that you know exactly what you're getting. I play this on turn 3 and hit something else, and I go, great, that's one card out of my deck. So when we get to the final turn, or when it's turn 5 and my opponent snaps, or I'm deciding if I'm trying to stay in this game or not, I have a higher probability of drawing what I need to off of the top. And I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as well. It's also notable to recognize that this is, yeah, absolutely, the second way to play a 6-drop on turn 4. And the second effect that a card does, like I'm phrasing this poorly, the second card that does the same effect is so much more meaningful than the first, because that consistency of drawing one of these goes way up, like skyrockets. Playing a deck that's completely centered around Wave Galactus, like that's the only way your deck wins is if I play Galactus on turn 4. Your odds of doing that just skyrocketed. And I think that that's certainly something to mention here. Whereas the second copy goes a long way. I mean, look at Morgan Le Fay. The second we got Airwalker, that deck became kind of a thing. It became a point package people could think about. It did well in a Golden Gauntlet even. Like, the second copy of a card goes a very long way, and this is either a second wave or it's a 3/7. And I kind of don't mind either effect. I'm a little interested to see what happens with this, playing it in some sort of like Agamotto shell, where your deck is already a little bit more inconsistent and just optimizing for good cards anyways, where you're just trying to play like a bunch of tech cards, some points, Agamotto smooths out the rest. I think that this is an interesting card to look at in a type of deck like that, or even in Thanos, where you kind of don't care if a card gets hit off the top, but you're really excited when your Kraglin hits a 6-drop in Thanos, because you're playing a lot of 6s in that deck. You can play an Aurora deck where you're playing a lot of things with that. You've got stones to carry you through the early game, so you can afford to play more big cards. Like there's a lot of interesting angles to attack here, and I don't know what deck is going to make this work, but I'm inclined to think this is going to be good in Wiccan or Thanos or Agamotto, or something is going to be able to make this card work to the point where you don't care at all that something gets banished. You're just happy with both effects, and I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah, that's my trouble, is figuring out what that deck is that can reasonably get because I think the energy is the best one, right? So what deck can reasonably get the energy on like a plus more than a little bit more than 50% of the time, let's just say, right? What deck can reasonably do that, and then what deck can reasonably justify playing this as a 3/7 sometimes and you didn't know it was going to be 3/7, right? I just really don't like that I don't know what it's going to do before I play it, and I can't plan my game plan around that, right? If I play this on turn 6 and it banishes a forward cost off the top, then I just played a 3/3 on turn 6, and that sucks, you know what I mean? And I didn't know that, you know? So I just try to think, I think that in that scenario where there is a deck that is okay with playing a 3/7 and can reasonably get that 6 cost on turn 4 and wants to do a 6 cost on turn 4 and understands that they maybe can't do it super reliably, I think that, this is a reasonable card. But I can't think of which deck does that right now myself. I don't really think that Wiccan or Agamotto are like rushing to get 6 energy on turn 4 and content enough with just 3/7.
I think that a potential option is like a Wiccan Oops All 4s deck, where you're playing like Quicksilver, Domino, bunch of 3s, bunch of 4s.
Yeah.
And the entire gimmick you can do is you can play something like Casanova or this on turn 3 and then Absorbing Mana on turn 4. Like you can set up for some pretty interesting things. I think that this is going to eat your deck a little too fast in a deck like this, but there's been a lot of hype around the Phoenix Force deck recently. Yeah. And where you get to play a 3-drop that scales and gives you a really good on reveal and can double up on that effect when you bring it back. I think this is certainly the worst of them. I think this is probably worse than even Dragon of the Moon at doing that at 3 cost. But but it is something to kind of look out for. That deck is invested in getting extra energy and having 3-drops with on reveals that power scale. It's not the most clean fit in the world. I don't think you're getting the energy super often in that deck, but when you do, it's going to be fine, and when you don't, you get to curve out and play your Phoenix Force line or play Misery on this and just kind of see what happens. I'm definitely interested in playing this also in decks that can generate cards in hand, because you might brick a draw if you repeat this on reveal too many times. And I kind of don't hate the idea of like this with Misery and Hood. But it's certainly hard to see what will happen with this card, because it's got a lot of dials on it. It has a lot of things to tweak to figure out, and I don't think like anyone that I know is completely psyched out of their mind about what they're going to try and build with this card. It's going to take a while before someone decides this is good and decides to find what deck it is. And when they do, that deck's going to be mediocre and really fun to play.
Yeah.
And I just hope that we get there pretty quick.
Yeah, so before we move on to the next card, I also thought about Phoenix Force. It's just like, yeah, you don't consistently get the energy. If you do get the energy, it's because you hit your own Phoenix Force or Adamantium Infusion, which you aren't super happy about.
Yeah.
And I think that the other 3-drops just have better on reveals in terms of the power that they get. So I thought about that too, because they do like 3-drops that give them power, but like you compare this to Sage, and it's just like and even if just as the backup 3 is like Cassandra Nova, I think you would just rather play the Cassandra Nova. But yeah, absolutely something that I thought about. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we got a 3/3 Jack Flag. He has ongoing. Your cards here with increased power have +2 power. So keep in mind this increases his own power as well. So it's not just a Captain America reprint. A lot of Captain America like call-outs in the season for some reason. I don't know Marvel stuff that well, so kind of interested in that. But yeah, what do you think?
This card seems good. I mean, it's hard to imagine this card being bad given what the text says. Like, you can kind of just read it and go, oh, every single deck that I'm playing right now has cards that want to increase power. Like, I don't think that there's a single deck that's, like, in my current rotation where I'm not applying green power to something. Just simply because Shadow King isn't super in right now. It doesn't stop Shao, so I haven't been seeing as much of it. And it seems pretty easy to enable this card. I think that that's kind of the easiest thing to look at here is it's so easy to enable, right? The floor is so high on this card, and the ceiling isn't the craziest thing ever. It's not going to be the biggest 3-drop that's ever existed, but it's certainly going to be reasonable. It's going to do stuff in ongoing decks. It can also elevate decks that aren't doing ongoing things to another level, which I think is interesting. Because a lot of the times things like Captain Marvel, which is the most similar card to this, or even Colonial America, where they have similar effects, 3-drop buffs your other things. Those cards require so much building around, and I think Jack Flag's easier to enable than that. This seems like a slam dunk card for Aurora decks.
Yeah, I was thinking about Aurora too. So I think the easiest comparison is Captain America, right? And so what do we know about Captain America is you want to play a deck with a lot of small cards, small ongoings, but let's just say cards because it's Jack Flag, right? A lot of small cards that you can fill up into a lane, you can stack into a lane, I should say. And you really don't want to have just one lane with that, because then you kind of have to play the Jack Flag into that lane, right? So you want to have at least 2 lanes where you can consider playing this. And gravy if those cards get extra bonus if they have power, you know what I mean? So how many decks can reasonably do that? Blue Marvel is a fantastic procer for this. Marvel Boy, Spectrum, Aurora, what else do we have? And then, like, I haven't seen Blue Marvel in quite a bit outside of Spectrum. I haven't seen Marvel Boy in quite a bit outside of some kind of Kopi Shang stuff. So where are we playing this that really wants to stack a lane? Are we playing this in Spectrum, and what is it cutting out? Are we playing this in Aurora, and do we have enough density of like small things that have different text other than ongoing, you know what I mean? What do we think?
I'm really interested in Zoo Thanos. I think that playing the ability to play Blue Marvel and Aurora with this guy in Thanos is huge. You can play this guy on 3 and he's going to win a lane in that type of deck, and you have so much opportunity to just have the imminent threat of big Thanos in a lane while also having Mockingbird to play for cheap. Like this card is a card that you can play down early, where you can go stone on 1, 2 stones on 2, play Jack Flag, completely ignore the lane. And Blarvel and the ability to just buff things up with Aurora, like, makes that lane a threat that they have to worry about the whole game and allocate more points to, probably on turns past turn 3. You can just completely seal off a lane on turn 3 and say, beat me if you can. I have Thanos, I can dump in one lane, I can go wide in the other way.
Yeah.
This card is a really meaningful inclusion in that deck. I think even just having Blue Marvel and Aurora to be able to proc that seems like enough enablers to me for this card. You're also playing Surge in those decks typically. I think that it's usually a pretty good inclusion in a lot of Thanos decks. Surge is really good when it hits a Thanos stone because it's just free rolling all the value. I think that that's another meaningful card to talk about here for sure. And I imagine that deck's probably pretty good right now. I've been really hyper invested lately in playing decks that play a Juggernaut and a big thing on turn 6. That's the type of deck that I just cannot get enough of playing right now because it seems to just be doing the best for me. And a lot of the time, Thanos can beat that deck. You can have the threat of Aurora coming down and just play a Juggernaut and a Mockingbird on instead. I think that deck has a lot of flexible ways to attack. It's unpredictable, and this card can slot in, and you're going to have small things to buff and a pretty good incentive to do it anyways, just because Aurora is so good in that list.
Yeah, he's a lot of power. I kind of wonder how much we could play this in like a Superior Spider-Man deck. If there's avenues for that, I don't know. I think Thanos. I don't know. I just think of this card, and I think he slots into a lot of kind of mediocre decks as a good card. My worry is that we just don't have enough, not consistency, enough, just enough cards in general that are going to give this a full lane of power. You know what I mean? Like if I play Aurora and it's just like an on reveal as well as the ongoing, this is a 3/7, and it's like, is that enough? You know what I mean? So that's all I wonder. That's my only question on this card. I think he has potential. Some people have talked about Surfer as well. I don't think this is a great Surfer card because, you know, if you have a Brood in there, like you want a full lane, and if you have a full lane in Surfer, you don't worry about the full lane. You worry about the other lane that you weren't able to fill, right? So I don't think this is a great home there. I think you just want like 1s and 2s that you're buffing, and maybe that's Thanos. I love Thanos so much, but I recognize that he kind of sucks right now. Maybe this is a decent card in that deck, but I don't think this is gonna propel it over the edge.
Yeah, I don't think it propels it over the edge, but it certainly elevates the archetype. It seems like it's okay in Aurora. I think it has some upsides here. The downside, though, is this card gets Shadow Kinged, this card gets Corded.
Yeah.
And both of those feel really bad. I do think it's worth noting the deck you get to play Cosmo and this in is Spectrum Ongoing. I think that's probably going to be its most likely home, just because it's got that built-in protection. But I'm really interested to see how this will perform in an Aurora Thanos deck, especially since Zombie Mr. Fantastic is such a good enabler for this as well. And it also enables Aurora really well. So I think there's a small package here that has a lot of promise, but I'm not sure if it'll come together.
Zombie Fantastic is a great shout. I totally forgot about this card. Alright, and then we have another card that works pretty well with this.
Our last card is Starhawk. It is a 2/2 that has an on reveal that says on odd turns, give your cards at the left location +1 power. On even turns, give to the right location. I'm honestly not sure what this text even means. You want to take this one away and explain to me what we're doing with this card?
Okay, so, and keep in mind he can buff himself. So if I play this on turn 2 on the right location, he's a 2/3 along with any 1-drop that I had on the right. So if I played Clea right and Starhawk on curve right, then he's essentially 2/4 that gave me a Clea spell, right? He works fantastically with Jack Flag when I was talking about not really having enough things that buff in terms of consistency wise. He literally fills the full lane. So if I play my Jack Flag on right, then all I need to do is play my Starhawk on turn 6 right, and I get a 3/11 Jack Flag, assuming that the lane is full. Which is pretty cool. He's another card that will proc Superior Spider-Man on curve. So if it's kind of a mediocre play to just play a 2/3 Starhawk, but you could do it if you really wanted that energy off of Superior Spider-Man. What are some other cards that want that buff? Clea, Sebastian Shaw, what is it, Captain Carter? I'm trying to think of if there's anything else that like really wants just even one power is big enough to warrant wanting to play this card, because for other cards like it's only one power and you have to have them already in the lane, so you got to consider that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of cards that I think you're happy with just proccing the one card with one power, but man, this card enables Jack Flag so well. Like this is the card I think that ties it all together. You can play. This is what I'm talking about. You play this on 6 with Juggernaut, and your flag lane gets Gargantuan. You completely seal off another lane with 7 power, which is enough in a fairly even lane, and you win 2 lanes. I am really invested in playing this card. I think that this card is fantastic in the Thanos deck. You have a lot of cheap cards you're playing. I think with enough enablers for it, Starhawk makes me feel like I can play Superior Spider-Man in that deck too. I am very high on Superior Spider-Man. I think the card's incredibly good.
Yeah.
It's like Luna Snow, but it doesn't give your opponent anything. And the more free that it becomes to just include him in every deck, the more he's going to be in just every deck. And Starhawk seems like a fantastic enabler for this kind of archetype, especially for the Aurora decks, because it's an on-reveal that can go in the Jack Flag lane and just give you one of those other things as well.
So here's my here's the devil's advocate, right? You have to play him late, kind of, sort of, right? He himself, like, is not very flexible. Like, if I want to buff the right lane, but it's an odd turn, then too bad, right? Like, there's nothing I can do about that. I have to play it on an even turn. I don't think that it's enough to, let's just say in the Thanos, you're talking about the Thanos deck, let's just say I haven't drawn Jack Flag. I don't think it's enough to just buff some stones and call this a 2-5 or 2-6 that you had to play late, and you had to play in the, you had to buff one location and you didn't have the flexibility. I don't think that's enough. I think that you have to have enough consistency in cards that really value that buff. Like I said, Jack Flag, Clea, Sebastian Shaw, Superior Spider-Man. And I don't know how much of that there is and how many decks kind of play enough of those cards together that still want to run Starhawk.
For sure. I think that, I mean, in the theoretical, like, Thanos or Aurora decks, it seems fine. I think that you'll get procs off of Captain Carter in those decks, because Captain Carter is just perfectly fine in the Thanos list when we're playing even just ongoing Thanos lists.
I didn't realize you were running that.
Spectrum, stuff like that. But it's a deck that's easy to fill the lane in, which I think makes it a pretty natural home. Same with Aurora decks, where you're just trying to fill the lanes out and play a big 6-drop. And this card also notably works with Wong. This is a card that you can have as like another payoff for playing that in your Aurora deck, where it doesn't feel quite as bad to be running Wong with those kind of things. I think that it's far from the worst card of the season. I don't know that it's going to be powerful enough to really make things happen, and I don't love that it has to be power that's in play. But keeping in mind, there's a lot of things that can proc off of this. Even Maverick is a good proc off of this. Like, just 1 power on Maverick is really 2 power. The more we can crank that dial up, the more valuable this card becomes. And I think that there's a lot of decks right now that are pretty invested in making green power. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this card ends up being pretty good. Even just the basic gameplay of having an Iron Man in a lane makes it all these procs matter 1 proc more, And I like the idea of just playing a 2-6 that's probably bigger than the 2-6, because you're not playing this in a deck that doesn't have ways to multiply off of that power. But being able to play a 2-6 on the final turn with a Juggernaut, that's my jam right now, or a Negasonic or whatever it is, where you can afford to play some interaction on the final turn, but also still have this to do a lot of damage, has been really huge. I've been having a lot of success recently with Ronin decks, because you can play Anti-Venom in that deck, get a free card, have a big 2-drop. Maximus with a Ronin in play is a huge 2-drop, and having Juggernaut, having a Negasonic to seal things out. I mean, there's a lot of really powerful things you can do to leverage the surprise factor of decks like this. And when they're expecting you to just drop Aurora, and you drop this in a 4-drop, this in a Shang-Chi, this in a big 4-drop, even if it's just like a Miss Marvel, like, who cares? Something that's big enough to surprise your opponent by playing 2 things instead of just 1, when they're like, oh, this is an Aurora deck, clearly this is what's going to happen, and you still get your Jack Flag lane procced up while still being able to interact, I think is just a huge upside for this kind of card.
Yeah, so I'm imagining this Aurora deck, right, and we're running Jack Flag, and I really do like the interaction between Starhawk and Jack Flag, where it just says, like, I don't care if, like, if we didn't draw the synergies that we needed to get the Jack Flag, I'm just going to play the Starhawk, and all of these things get buffed by Jack Flag, right? I think that's a really good interaction. Where it gets kind of interesting is that you have to kind of pre-plan where you're going to play the Jack Flag. If you say, oh, I have the Aurora and I really want to play this game, okay, so then I need to play the Jack Flag on the left and make sure that I play the Starhawk on turn 5 or 3 or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I think that's actually pretty cool gameplay. I don't know how much that hampers the card, if that makes any sense. I think this is a cool card. I think like a 2-3 might... I don't know.
I don't think it really hampers it at all. I think it's kind of just the unfortunate play pattern of get good. Like, you can play around this. It says when it does the thing. It's a very different story than some of the other cards we've talked about, where it just oscillates between one or the other, and you don't know what you're getting. You always know which lane this card is going to proc, and I think that's a huge saving grace. If it just said on reveal, buff the left or the right lane, like, who knows, you'd be like, you just never play this card.
Yeah.
But being able to plan around it seems perfectly reasonable. I think that it's like something you're able to do. I'm still invested in playing this in the like Shang-Chi Wiccan decks that are admittedly bad but get to play Superior Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like there's things we can do, and it's elevating decks that I think are like tier 2 decks that with the right build can absolutely compete.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the exact type of card, if you're the developers of Snap, you want to be releasing. You don't want to be dragging down the top decks or printing a new Stardust if Hela is the best deck. You'd rather just make the tier 2 decks able to compete and make it so that everyone feels like they get to play their cards and that they're viable. And I think that the interaction between Starhawk and Jack Flag is genuinely notable. That's a big amount of power for 5 energy, and I'm pretty invested in playing big 5s, even going back to the beginning where we're talking about skipping turn 5, getting an Iron Man, playing She-Hulk in a big 5. Like, this is a big 5, kind of. You can do that in decks that are doing gimmicky things, and you can squeeze this into a lot of places. Like, it's not too difficult of a condition to ask, I don't think, to play cards, because these cards are just asking you to play cards in a lane, and we want to be playing multiple cards in a lane we're invested in winning anyways. So I don't think that they're asking too much of you.
Yeah, I think the more I talk about this card, the more I do think that the Jack Flag, like if Jack Flag wasn't releasing this season, I would not be nearly as high on this card. And maybe it's just I shouldn't be banking too much on that, but I think that's a really good combination. So maybe it'll work out. I wanted to talk about a final ranking in just a second. So gonna compile all these cards, get ready, and let's do it. Final rankings. Snappleton, let's go worst to best. What do you think?
Sounds good. I think that the worst card of this season is unfortunately Magus. I really want that to be good. I'm going to try harder than anyone to make this card work, but I don't think I can justify putting a bunch of mediocre cards in a deck to make it happen.
Yeah. I'm sorry, because I know you were excited to talk about Magus before we got into this this recording. I'm sorry that you are so low on it now, but I agree with you that it's a stinker. I do think this is one of the worst cards that they are going to release anytime in the recent future, or in the recent past, I mean. And the recent future, I guess. I don't think there's anything as bad, so... But I'm sorry to say.
I wished.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be good for free-to-play either. I struggle to see how any collection will make this be really good. My second worst card is, I think I'm going to have to say it's Kraglin.
Okay. My second worst card I have Major Victory. I think that I can't justify playing a card that's above rate on stats that gives me cards that I'm not actively already putting in my decks.
Okay, fair. I think the next one is Kraglin for you.
I think the next one is Star-Lord.
Oh, no. Oh, never mind. We have varying takes. Okay. Star-Lord.
We have very varying takes. I think Star-Lord is the third worst. Or maybe the fourth worst. I don't know which one we're on. But Star-Lord is just... It fits in a bad deck. It fits in high Evo, and I do think it really elevates that deck. But when I say really elevates that deck, we're talking about Marvel Snap here, right? It has to have a high percentage of value over replacement in a 12-card deck.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking like already a twelfth of the deck is less than 10%. And then it has to make that card meaningfully better in a huge way to even make a like move the needle on how good the card is and how good the deck is. And as much as I love the idea of getting to play a Juggernaut with my Hulk on the final turn, I think it asks a lot of you to give up your first couple of turns, especially when there's a lot of decks that are just doing more efficient things, playing multiple cards to the board like Xiao. So I don't see it competing in a Xiao meta or anytime soon, and I really, really hope I'm wrong.
Okay, I actually think Star-Lord is really good for the High Evolutionary archetype, and I actually do think that High Evo might see some play. That's my take. Honestly, it's been a while since I feel like I always run into High Evo and like Conquest, and it's like some crappy build running armor for no reason. So I think maybe it's been a while since I made it myself, and like maybe the cards are worse than I remember. But I feel like there's something there. I feel like Star-Lord is an all-star. I really like the idea of like Star-Lord, and then you go Man-Spider or Juggernaut, and then your big Hulk, your big whatever. And I think that has a lot of promise. So I'm higher on Star-Lord. I'm lower on Kraglin, and then after that I have Major Victory. And I don't think that either of those are good for free-to-play players either. Major Victory is...
Star-Lord's really good.
Yeah,
free-to-play players, because all you need is one other card
to
have like a viable deck out of the start. All you need is High Evo and this guy, and you can make it happen. But it kind of elevates the deck from being a tier 3 deck to a tier 2 deck.
Okay.
I wish it did a little more. My next card is Kraglin. I think that
there we go.
Kind of around that range. I can't pretend that he's fantastic. I really want this card to be awesome, and I think it's better than people are giving it credit for. But I don't see it being like better than a solid chunk of the meta viable 3-drops we already have. So I can't, in good conscience, put it any higher than that.
Okay, all right. I feel like after that it's like a higher tier of cards, and personally I put Star-Lord in the higher tier. Really good. But after that I think it's either Moondragon or it's like the Starhawk plus Jack Flag package. I just feel like they're all kind of together. If that makes sense.
I think the Starhawk Jack Flag package is kind of they form the core of my like third place tied for spot. I think that it's really hard to justify putting them any higher than that. Like I said, it's a tier. The Aurora decks just aren't that great right now, and if it elevates that deck to a high percentage, like it is notably 2 cards that go in that deck, not just one like Star-Lord, but I still can't put it any higher. And then I have Moondragon at the 2, and I think Drax is the best card.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I obviously think that Drax is a card that's good enough to possibly get nerfed. Maybe not in the Shu meta, but like I think in any meta where it's just past 7 power, like there's a single 8 power card in the deck. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a fantastic final turn play where you can Captain Marvel. And I just think it's a really good card, especially compared to the old Datamine version that was a 4/4 that got +4. I think that the energy change is just huge. So yeah, that's where we're at. I'm looking forward to the month. What do you got? What's your final thoughts?
My final thoughts is I'm going to be playing like an absurd amount of really bad Wicked decks with all of these 3-drops that just ask you to jump through 15 hoops when I'm already jumping through 12 in every Wicked deck that I'm playing. So I'm pretty excited. I don't think that there's anything, again, particularly viable for like my preferred archetype, anti-venom control type things. I don't see anything really boosting up my favorite deck here, so I can't pretend to be the most invested in it, but I really, really like Drax, and I think that that's the one that has the most promise in just slotting into anything. So if you can only pick up one card from the season, make it Drax. Yeah, that's what I would say. Drax is especially like good for anyone. Like, it doesn't matter your collection. I feel like Drax is going to be good for you. In terms of decks I'm looking forward to, I think High Evolutionary will be pretty fun. I actually think that he'll be good. I pray that Star-Lord is not going to be good in some kind of Symbiote Spider-Man deck, because I really don't like those decks with Black Panther and Zola and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that that's not good. Zola's kind of a good shout-out for Star-Lord too. But anyways. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a world where you play him on 4, Zola on 5, and then just get like 1 billion energy?
Yeah, you could do that.
Now that we're like back on it, like you skip turns 1 through 3, he gives you 3. use Zola Imp, that unspends an energy on that turn as well. Like, you have one unspent there, get 2 Star-Lords.
Gross.
Okay, that's pretty sweet. That's better
Gross.
than anything Kraglin can ever do.
Yeah.
I'll-
Maybe? Okay, yeah. Maybe, oh, God. It's going to be good. I hate it. Anyways, hopefully that's not good. Signing off now. Appreciate you guys. Look forward to February, and I especially look forward to March. So, hope you guys can kind of listen to what we talk about come March season. Thanks. Peace.
Yeah, absolutely. Peace.